So, 30th day of July, 2018, allegedly, according to that thing we call a calendar. This, indeed, is the Ocelli Effect. Broadcast live from the facilities of Ocelli.com, but also heard on a variety of other networks. We do appreciate you for tuning in on this particular day, especially. It is a moon day, or Monday. That's what the calendar says anyway. And, of course, we're going to kick off the week the way that I'm really getting accustomed to doing it, because this will be, yet again, another in the series with Jordan Maxwell regarding religion. And we have been through a lot of different parts here. What part are we up to here? Let's see. Are we on part 5? You know, I'm going to have to take a look back. See, 1 week off and you mix it up a little bit. You can't rightfully clearly know exactly what number we're on. There's been a succession of interesting information here. We've discussed some of the fallacies, some of the oddities, and some of the knowledge which appears to be hidden in plain sight. Some of it not so plainly visible, though. Jordan Maxwell is exactly the kind of guy to talk about precisely all those things I just said. And I urge you to go to jordanmaxwellshow.com. That's jordanmaxwellshow.com. Why do I say that? Because that is the only website that is actually Jordan Maxwell's. jordanmaxwellshow.com is the place to go. And just as another quick addendum before I get to asking Jordan how he's doing and what direction he would like to go in tonight, quite honestly, let's also remember that there is the Research Society, and you can get to it through jordanmaxwellshow.com. You click on there. There's a one-time fee if you go for a lifetime membership. And there is a lot of deep information there, a lot of stuff which is not collected in a public way elsewhere. There is information being constantly added. There's already a ton of information in it, stuff that I've never seen before, to be honest with you. Some stuff I'm familiar with, and it's good to get a refresher on, but stuff I've never seen or heard from before, along with suggestions of other reading materials. There's some free ebooks. There's a lot of images, a lot of things in there, but you can go much deeper into this type of topic that we're covering tonight and many, many others. As a matter of fact, just the religion tab in and of itself, not the largest part of what's in the Research Society's area, but I got to tell you, it's one of the most important to me, and it is endless, the amount of knowledge and information that Jordan seems to have collected over the past more than 5 decades, going through these topics, studying them, and you get a taste of that by going through into the Research Society, where I do believe it is still evolving. There is a great deal of information yet to be added. There are many terabytes, plural, of information still waiting to be added, but there is also a ton there already. Anyway, jordanmaxwellshow.com. That is his website, and that's the only one that's actually his. Jordan, I know, yes, I just gave like a bunch of mouthfuls there, but I thought it was necessary before I get lost in the topic tonight again of religion in and of itself. How you doing, my friend?
Well, I think okay for the moment. I'm awful tired but I'm not tired from today. I'm tired from 60 years ago. So, but there's just so much that I, want to tell the world. And the problem is that I forget because of my age. I'm almost 78 now. Another couple of months I'll be 78. But I have so many things I want to talk about in so many categories, so many different subjects that I have come across in the past 59 years. It's actually almost 60 years I've been looking at the dark side of the world that I live in. And my goodness, there's just so much out there people don't know that have never been told. But it's not really not really hidden as such, although it seems to be, and that people just don't know about it. But it's not really hidden. It's in old reference books. And if you don't have time, if you got a family and children and you're working and you're living from day to day, you don't have time to spend in university libraries daily, day in and day out, and sacrificing your life and your time and your family and your resources, and just sacrificing everything for one overshadowing awesome passion, and that is to study the foundations of the lies of the world we live in. Where did these ideas come from? Who presented these concepts and ideas and belief systems to the world and the beginning? Where did it start? And then you look at the founders of the modern day religions, the reverends and the preachers and the priesthoods who founded the different philosophies and religions of today, and go back and look at each one and see what is their story. Where did they get their money? Where did they get these ideas that they were expounding 500 years ago or 100 years ago, 80 years ago? Where did they get these ideas from, and how did they get the money? Because you can't do anything in the world without money, period. And so, after looking at the world I live in for some 60 years, I am totally convinced that the people have no ability to protect themselves. They have no opportunity to investigate for themselves. And we now, unfortunately, because of the world we live in, we now today are living in a society, a human society on this earth, that does not in any way, shape, or form care about facts or facts that can be presented in a court and proven beyond the shadow of a doubt. It doesn't matter. We find that in courts today. Today, if you go to court, it doesn't matter if you've got the law books with you. You photocopied all the documents in the case, and you can show the court exactly what happened, and you can prove everything and show them what the law says. An actual point of fact, it doesn't matter in America what the facts are. Period. It doesn't matter. What matters is, what do the people think? What do the judges think? Whatever it is they think, that's the way the case is going to go. They don't care what the law says. Judges couldn't care less what the law says, because we're not living under the United States of America's legal system. We're living under something called the U.S. criminal justice system, obviously implying the criminals are in control of the justice. It's a criminal justice system. And that means it doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter what you can prove in court. What it matters is how much money is the court going to make? How much are the lawyers going to make? And the bottom line is, it doesn't matter what the facts are. So I have applied that same understanding to religions, to banking, to government, to everything, and I've discovered that it works perfectly. The religions of this world, the governments of this world, the educational colleges and universities of this world, they couldn't care less about facts of life. They have an agenda, and the agenda is in the book. And so they have books to read, and the agenda will tell you what you need to think and how you need to understand something. And so that's why today the world is so confused, because nobody seems to be able to go back to the original and look at where something started and have the intellectual honesty to to agree and to understand it and to deal with it. Most people do not have intellectual honesty, unfortunately.
Well, Jordan, here's where I need to ask you a question, and this is something that I put to you as somebody who has studied things for a very long time, and you have the ability, you have the knowledge, the personal knowledge, to understand that the availability of information is a separate issue from people's intellectual integrity, and it is also a problem because here's the thing: when we talk about the original, right? When we talk about the intent, when we talk about the language in and of itself, the language in and of itself is a problem. The idea that one can get a hold of the original document or something that is original or is written as intended is difficult to begin with, and then comes the problem of interpretation. And this is why the discussion of religion is so important, because as we see today, even today's news stories, right? Jeff Sessions is issuing an announcement that he's going to have a religious protection task force now within the government. I have never heard such a crazy idea that a government which is supposed to be, not respecting any particular religion or be a party to a religion or restrictive of a religion is now going to have a task force on religious protection. And meanwhile, it seems to me as though those on high have no understanding of the things which they wish to protect, the things they wish to destroy, the things that it's all like a giant game where everybody's blindfolded so that you don't really know who your enemy is, but you're still moving around. I mean, that's the crazy part of this, that when people talk about, well, I'm a Christian, let's just say, they have no understanding of what that means. I'm not right. saying that I am. I'm saying that I say they have no understanding of that.
That's right. They don't.
And it's very strange to me because they say, well, look, here's my book. Here is my Bible. Here is my word from God himself. And I'm a bad person for ever questioning that maybe that's not correct in some way, the things that they're spouting out of their mouths, when I know very well they never read their own book, which is translated into English, which, okay, fine, we could argue about what a translation is, but think about this. There are a lot of people driven by ideas based on things that are supposed to be from these ancient documents, and it doesn't matter if it's a government, a religion, a legal practice. And meanwhile, they've never seen, have no clue about those documents, have no clue about the foundations of where it came from, and people's lives are run, destroyed, built upon an illusion. Am I crazy?
No, that is precisely what I'm saying. I'm saying it in different words, but you're saying it the same identical thing. Yes, you're absolutely right. People are believing things, as I said, if you go into a church, they will say that you're a believer. In Christianity, if you adhere to the Christian doctrine, going to a church, you are what is called a believer. Why do they call you a believer? Because it's obvious you don't know anything, but you are given to believe in something. You're given to believe that you know and understand something. But when you go back to specialized schools and go to seminary libraries like I do for years and years, I was living in seminary libraries where they have all the big, huge reference works, encyclopedias, concordances, and dictionaries in the Bible and theology and religion. And you just start looking at all the religions of the world and the things that they teach, and then go and look in the big encyclopedias of religion and theology and look at the words and the terms and the concordances in the Bible. And then you begin to, if you're writing down all that you're learning about different subjects, one day you're going to come up with boxes filled with handwritten documents and handwritten notes that are telling you all of the belief systems of the world, where they're really coming from. Because you begin to see the connection between Hinduism and Judaism, between Hinduism and Christianity, between Islam and Hinduism. You begin to see all the connections going back into the ancient world. And then you begin to also see the lies, the misunderstandings, the purposeful misstating of facts by the church by the church fathers, by the different groups, and then, I've mentioned it before, there was no man on a cross in Christianity for the first 600 to 700 years. So I would say for the first 700 years of Christianity, there was no mention of, or no picture of, or no discussion of a man hanging on a cross. That didn't come till 700 years later, after Christianity was started, that they finally came up with a symbol which is now today universally accepted as a symbol for Christianity. But it wasn't used for 700 years. So how many people know that, and how many people care, and what does that mean for the belief system you have today? Well, that quite simply means that you don't know what's going on. You have no idea in the world what happened the first 600 or 700 years of Christianity. Has never been told to you. You don't know where the Vatican comes from. You have no idea about the fall of the Roman Empire and why it fell and what the name of the tune is for America today and why we are today nothing more than a Roman Empire even today. The United States government is a Vatican Jesuit institution, period. End of sentence. And anybody who's ever done any research on Washington, D.C. and the founding of America know that the Vatican is the bottom line for the rule in America, which ultimately influences the whole world. So I'm just saying that there's a lot more for us to learn. Excuse me, and I'm telling you, I think the reason why it's so difficult for people to learn new tricks. We say old dogs don't learn new tricks. But I think the reason why it's so difficult is because most people have the attitude in life which is expressed in the Bible and the New Testament as the Pharisees. You have to ask yourself, when Jesus is condemning the Pharisees, there was at least a dozen different groups, supposedly groups of ancient Jewish people, according to the history and the story that were given. There was about 10 to 12 groups of Jews, and all of them having different belief systems and different ideas. But in the Bible, it only has in the New Testament Jesus condemning one or two, the scribes and the Pharisees. But he really rant and raves and condemns the scribes and the Pharisees. Well, who were the scribes? Well, the scribes scribble. We got our word scribbling from scribe. So the scribes that Jesus condemned were the scribblers of Scripture. Scriptures, scribe, scribble. So they scribbled the words, and so they were the writers. The people who wrote all the religious literature were the scribes. They wrote down so the people could learn from the religion by reading the book. And so the scribes were condemned. As Jesus said, they were liars and they misled people. And then there was the Pharisees. And look up in the encyclopedia, Pharisee was a lawyer. And the lawyers represented the state. They don't give a damn about the truth. They represent Caesar. And so even the Jews who were Pharisees were the lawyers, the Jewish lawyers. And so Jesus rant and raved about the Jewish lawyers who lie and deceive and become wealthy by manipulating people and stealing their property, etc. So then there were two groups of Jews that Jesus rant and raved about, and that was the scriptural writers, people who write all these holy books that the bookstores are just filled to the brim with all kinds of goofballs who write about this, that, and the other thing for Christians to read and then the lawyers, the Jewish lawyers. So I'm just saying that when you look at the religions today, just have an open mind and understand that nothing we're reading today, nothing we understand today is what it was 2,000 years ago. In the first century, the first 100 years of Christianity bears no resemblance to Christianity today at all, period.
Well,
It should
though,
scare
right?
people.
It couldn't, Jordan, because at that time, and let's, take a second here, because I want to really throw something at you that I don't think you've ever really addressed anywhere. I've never seen it anyway, but I know you're going to have an answer for this. At that time, historically, okay, and I'm not talking about descriptions from the holy books. I'm talking about, other things that are describing the way that religious practices, what people would call religious practices, are performed today, but the way that we would describe it back then. It wasn't like it is now, where you have a building and you have a church. You had these get-togethers, you had these temples, and these temples could be for various purposes. Now, how did you learn about your religion then? Well, kind of the way that people do sometimes nowadays, where they go and they listen to a man speak, right? So, but nobody got to read along with that man. Nobody got to even look at a book, no matter what you think of the translation or whatever it was. They would just gather around, and one man would read, one man would sing. Maybe there was more to the show, if you will, but they were kind of like shows that were put on, right?
That's right.
This is why, because people wonder about, how is it that Christ just traveled places and what, people were magnetically attracted to him? Well, the reason why they're saying that he behaved the way he did, is because this is the common practice of, everybody's religious practices. This wasn't, just the Jews or just the Christians who were coming into being. This was the way everybody did it, is that you sat around and you learned from somebody who did know how to read, or not even with books or scrolls or scriptures or scribes. In some cases, they just knew because they were taught. And you got an oral presentation along with some theatrics, right?
That's right.
It's a different time to begin with, isn't it?
Totally different. As I've said in the past discussions, that the word the in Greek is God. And so we get our word the. And so the emphasizes something important. We have facts, but then this is the fact. And so the is in something important because in Greek the is God. So that's why we have churches, which we call a theater. It's like a movie house. It's a big theater. Everyone comes in, pays whatever they can, and they sit and watch a show. And it's a theater. It's a God show. And so they're putting on the God show, and they light candles and sing hymns, and it makes people feel very holy and feel good about themselves, and they're there with their friends and their neighbors, and so it's kind of like a fraternal order. It's kind of like a Masonic order or a club in which everyone is there to encourage each other, and they all feel good about each other's company. But nobody, including the priests and the clergy, actually know where these words have come from, why we have candles in a service, and the connection between candles on an altar and an erection in sex. As people have no idea where the concept of the candle came from, and they have no idea what the ritual singing of hymns has to do with mind control and the frequencies of mind control, and why churches are built on the particular way they are built with these steeples. And steeples represent, according to dictionaries and encyclopedias, will tell you that church steeples represent a male phallic. How many people know that? So the point I'm making is the entire superstructure of what we call the religious world, be it Christian or Jewish or Hindu, all has to do with the phenomenally basic world we live in. Sex, the stars, money and corruption, control and government is all a mess. And it's all designed for the picking of the people for what they want. They know not everybody is going to want to be a Jew. Not everybody is going to want to be a Catholic. Not everybody is going to want to be Mohammedan. Not everybody is going to want to be what everybody else is. So they have to provide the human family with all kinds of alternatives and ideas. And some people don't like this and that. That sounds like Jehovah's Witnesses. So people will join the Jehovah's Witnesses. Some people don't like this and that about the government. Well, that sounds like Seventh-day Adventists. So they got a church to go to, Seventh-day Adventists. And then they found out that, no, this and that's wrong, so we don't like this and that. Well, that sounds like the Church of God in Pasadena. And so when you're through with this, at the end of the period of time, for 2,000 years, we have all kinds of religions. I once read it was like 2,400 so-called Christian religions and cults around the world. 2,400 different Christian churches and ideas around the world. And God knows how many Jewish groups there are. There's all kinds of Jewish groups, and all of them seem to hate each other. And there's Muslim groups who hate each other. And all the different religious groups, they all hate each other. It's a monstrosity of ignorance that the human race is involved in. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to extricate ourselves out of this mess, because wisdom and knowledge is the only thing that's going to help you. And the people have no knowledge. Even the scripture says, my people are dying from a lack of knowledge. They haven't got the faintest idea in the world what is really going on the earth that they live on. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just wake people up to the fact that you're not intellectually honest and you really don't know what's going on. And you really actually should go back to school and learn how to read. And if you can read, then put down the magazines and the Paris Hilton stories in your local supermarket and start reading the encyclopedias and dictionaries and go to a library. My God, you still today have a world of knowledge out there on the web. All the encyclopedias of the world are on the web. The dictionaries of the world are all there in every language. And the people are more ignorant today than they've ever been. So that tells me that most of the web is being used for entertainment, and almost nothing out there is being used to educate the human mind. And what makes it even worse is that the government of the United States does not want you to know what's going on. The government is so corrupt today, it does not want you to understand anything. That's why they make damn sure that you have a liquor store on every corner in every city, period. So they can make liquor available to everybody. And they make it cheap enough so that they will be, no matter who you are, they will always have a drink for you to keep you intoxicated. They always have the titillating stories about sex and drugs and mafiosis and gangsters with movies. The system wants to make sure that you are continually occupied drinking alcohol, shooting drugs, selling drugs, involved in corruption, anything to keep you busy so you don't look at really who owns you.
You know what, Jordan?
They're doing.
You're exactly right, and I have a live question that I want to enter right now because I think it speaks to the heart of what it is you're talking about. And first of all, it's not just the United States government that wants to keep us this way. It seems to be a worldwide strategy to make sure that we're all at each other's throats over these types of issues at their core. And here's the thing about it. The question in and of itself tells you something, Jordan. So let's take it nice and slow. It's a short, easy question, but I want to break it down a little. So They're asking essentially, obviously, it says, obviously neither one of you is a Christian. Okay, that's the first part of it. It's a statement, but then the question comes. How would each of you describe yourselves in a religious way? Okay, I'm going to stop right there. First of all, the use of the word describe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gee, Jordan, it seems to me as though the prefix "d" means to do something against or to remove something. You know, if you degrease something, you're removing grease. If you if you deregulate, it means you're removing regulations or you're unregulating.
That's right.
So describe, to de-write. That's interesting. Because the word scribe, as you were talking about earlier, scribe and scribble, there we go. So, you know, it's interesting that you describe yourself by unwriting something. I think that's a fascinating term in and of itself. But how we describe ourselves is an interesting thing, too, because, well, gee, isn't that the trouble? You're encouraged to describe yourself, to adopt a label. And, you know, those 2,300 or 2,700 or however many, depending on what day you decided to read, about how many Christian groups there are, the truth is there are many more. And they're very small and they don't get recognized. I mean, there are Christian groups out there that consist of a dozen people or less. There are Christian groups out there that consist of 50 people that do not make the news, that nobody bothers to recognize, that seem to all have their own kind of brand on Christianity, where it's like this part of it's correct, this part of it isn't. We interpret the book this way, we don't interpret it that way. We see it more extreme. The only thing they have in common is that they all say they have the answer and they know what the intent of God is, which is something that personally I just find laughable. Now, if I'm to have to be forced to attach a label to myself, I call myself pagan because I see no religious group which ascribes to what I understand about the universe, and it appears as though it is a collection of various things from various faiths that come together and make sense. And therefore, I find a great deal of truth and a great deal of deception in almost any religion you can present me with. So that is how I describe myself. Now, Jordan, you know, obviously you speak for yourself, but the other part of what the person said here is that they kind of feel as though they're listening to two atheists talk about religion. I am not an atheist. I do not say at any point in time that there is no God, which is the definition of an atheist. Matter of fact, I think there are many gods. And so there you go, another reason why I'll accept the pagan label, but I will not go any more specific than that because, well, that's just the way it is. Now, Jordan, you might want to answer it completely differently, but let's begin with, you know, first of all, it sounds as though we don't believe in God according to this person. And how would you describe yourself? I've already done it and given you a minute to think about it, so up to you wherever you want to take that.
Well, first of all, if you go to again, encyclopedias of history, going back to the Roman Empire, go to the early history of the Christian Church, and you will find that in Rome, the earliest Christians, this is from an encyclopedia, not from me, the earliest Christians were referred to by Romans as atheists. They did not believe in God. Why? They were atheists. Why? Is because they did not believe in the Roman gods. And since in Rome, the Romans understood thoroughly that their gods, the many different gods of the ancient Roman Empire, was absolutely, definitively, without a doubt, absolute gods. And if you did not accept the Roman gods as an absolute truth, then you were obviously, in point of fact, an atheist, because you do not believe in Rome's gods. And so today, when somebody makes a statement that I am an atheist, when my whole life I have said over and over again, I have the highest respect for the presence in the universe of what men have called God. but you need to define your terms. When I define God, I mean some sort of an unseen, absolutely profoundly wise and intriguingly simple, powerful presence around us. It kind of overshadows, I like that term, it overshadows our life. It doesn't slap you around, it doesn't make you do things, but it's as if something is watching you all your life, where you're going, what you're doing, and watching what you're catering yourself to, and it is some kind of a spiritual presence that you feel, that the universe is being overseen by some kind of a higher power, some sort of a higher, and why? Because there were too many things which happen which imply an intelligent stuff going on all around you that you're not aware of. I mean, there's all kinds of experiences people have today in their life. They keep seeing certain numbers. Some people see certain numbers keep coming up in their life. Some people seem to have premonitions of the future, and they see things which are going to happen. There are people who are psychics who can read your mind. There are all kinds of strange phenomena which we live with every day and people experience every day, which has no explanation whatsoever. And of course, the Marxist, Leninist, communist people of America who couldn't care less about God or anything spiritual at all, they say the whole thing is all a bunch of bull and it has nothing to do with anything on the earth. Well, I say no, I beg to differ. There are too many things going on in this earth and in the lives of every person on the earth. And everybody I meet tells me, boy, I had this strange experience when somebody came into my life and did this or that, and I saw this or that, and I had these strange premonitions. So I know that there's just too much going on with the human family that defies imagination. So I, like all other men who care, I have to assume that there is some kind of an overshadowing intelligence watching us. And it gives to each one according to his deed. You do things good for people, people will come back and do good things for you. If you go out and hurt other people will come in and hurt you. So there's like a laws in the universe. What goes around comes around. And why is that in everybody's life? Does somebody keep track of every single human? Yes. Somehow or another there is a continual monitoring of human life on the earth, and everybody gets what's coming to them eventually. So there's too many things that I know and I've seen with my own eyes that tells me. There's a classic example, and let me give you an example of what I'm talking about when I say something is overshadowing us. Listen to what I'm going to tell you. You may have heard this before, but if you haven't, listen closely. It has to do a situation with Abraham Lincoln and John Kennedy. Have you ever heard the connections between Abraham Lincoln and John Kennedy, the president?
Yeah, actually I have, because I've spent a lot of
time
on Kennedy.
Let me read this. Let me read this to the people who haven't. If you've never heard this, then listen closely. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John Kennedy was elected to Congress 1946. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both presidents were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives of both presidents lost children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both presidents were shot in the head. President Lincoln's secretary was named Miss Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Miss Lincoln. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both successors to both presidents were both named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln, was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald, three names, Lee Harvey Oswald, who was said to have assassinated Kennedy, was born in 1939, exactly 100 years apart. Both assassins were known by their three names. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Lincoln was shot at a theater called Ford. Kennedy was shot in a car made by Ford called Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth ran from a theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Both Oswald and Booth were assassinated before they could go to trial. All of these coincidences are not coincidences. This all seems to be telling you a story, that things are happening all around you and they're mysterious. Why these dates? Why these connections behind the scenes? So the world is filled with strange things. Like I said, the book, the complete works of Charles Fort, give you a whole book full of things which have never been figured out why they happen. So I'm just saying that the world is being overshadowed by something that mankind calls God. But you have no idea what that word means. You have no real idea about what you're talking about. So you need to define your terms and wake up and and train yourself to be intellectually honest. And then you will always see how much you don't know, how much you don't understand. And then you will begin to ask questions. And that's what the human brain was designed to do, is wake up, grow up, become adult, and ask questions and begin to train your mind to be intellectually honest and look at the facts and look up the facts. Like Steve Allen used to say, there are two kinds of facts, the kind you look up and the kind you make up. And so you really need to understand where the words come from. As I said to you before, Christians go to church but have no idea in the world where the word church really actually in fact came from and what it actually means and what it's based on. And it's referred to as Mother Church. And have no idea in the world why Mother Church is a female and why, when you go to a church, you will see the windows of a church and the opening door of a church are usually pointed arches. And therefore, it's the pointed arches that you're entering into Mother Church. The pointed arches windows, pointed arch doors represent the female, the pointed arch in sex. And so the pointed arch is a symbol for Mother Church, Mother Nature. I'm just saying that once you break down these words and terms and symbols, catchphrases, and begin to look at the history of where your religion came from, you're going to find, like everybody else in the world, there's very, very few people who actually have done their homework and understand what it is they think they believe, and at least can make a decent proposal for you to understand what they believe. Most people just believe something. They don't know what they believe. They have no idea where any of it comes from. And that's all I'm trying to do, is to point up to people how much they don't know. I've done a lot of research on words and terms and symbols and catchphrases there's just an enormous amount of material on my research society. So if you're interested in the kind of thing I'm talking about, go on my website, There are other websites out there that carry my name, but they don't belong to me. People are using my name to make themselves money. They're using my name to draw an interest for them to sell their stuff. And so they put my name on it because my name is known and people trust my person and they trust my voice. And so they use my name to make themselves money. I don't see a dime of any of it. I only have one website, and that's Jordan Maxwell Show, SHOW. You don't add that show onto my name, then that's not me. Jordan Maxwell Show, and go on my Jordan Maxwell Show, and you will see a folder or a link that says Jordan Maxwell Research Society or Research Website. Click on that and join my Jordan Maxwell Research Society. And there you will find I've put all the pictures and documents and words, encyclopedias and photocopies and audio and video, lectures, all kinds of research I've been doing over the years on all sorts of subjects, from government to religion to banking to military, what these words actually mean and how you're being lied to and deceived. So that's the best I can do. I will go to my grave doing the best work I can possibly do to provide for people information and where to go to get the knowledge, the best I can. So I feel...
And something needs to be said here is I'm sure that you know that no matter how much work you accomplish, by the time you're done, it is incomplete because people will need to take what you've done and take it further, Jordan. Why do I say that? Because, the human family is in a limited state as it is.
Of course.
We don't have the ability, the very simple discussion here about what is God. Let's define God for a moment. That is not something we can do during a conversation here. Let's be honest about it. I mean, look, what you described as God, I should have said something during my definition there. That to me sounds like what I call source. And that is incomprehensible to the human mind at this time. We can still make attempts at it, but I don't believe that we have the maturity or the intellectual strength to absorb what that really means. It doesn't mean that you can't acknowledge it and know that it's there. You don't have to know exactly how a bear's digestive system works in order to know that there's a bear near you in the forest, okay? It's pretty simple. But at the same time, you and I are not able to define this overshadowing presence. I agree with you. That is exactly the way to look at it, but I think that what people have done is utilized this universal feeling, this universal connection with something that is obviously there. And, again, you can't call me an atheist. I mean, I guess the Romans would call me an atheist, but you can't call me an atheist, and I don't think anybody could call you one, because to me that term still applies as someone who doesn't believe that there is a overshadowing presence. Okay?
Well, that's right.
But let me just ask you this, because I do encourage people to go to your website, and we'll definitely talk about that some more. And I encourage everybody that can to join the Research Society, because there's deeper information in there than there is on the public site. There's plenty of cool stuff on the public site, and it's only at Jordan Maxwell Show. You need to put all that together, just jordanmaxwellshow.com. You get there to get it, but, I mean, in reality, we would like to see your work go further, and even over the course of 3 lifetimes, honestly, Jordan, you can't really nail it all down anyway. This is going to have to be something that's done by more than one individual over time, and that's the scary thing, because they've utilized exactly that sort of pattern to create these control mechanisms through Mother Church, through these different places. And I mean, I've even gone to a smaller libraries where
gathering.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've gone to places like there's a great theological library over at Drew University in New Jersey. I used to live in New Jersey. They actually have a very good library, but hardly anybody even knows it's there. People think today that if they can find a link and click on it on the internet, it's easy to find. All the information's out there. You know, there's really everything that's out there is out there, and I know how to sort through this. No, you don't. Because
that's exactly right.
You know, you could not even begin to deal with probably finding things in the religious libraries. You know, who even knows what a library is anymore? It seems like a strange conversation. But the idea that, you know, first of all the knowledge is hidden somewhere deep underground in a city somewhere is wrong. But at the same time, the idea that people have actually been able to utilize it, you know, like among the population, like a whole lot of people are awake and aware and conscious of what's actually happening. This is also extremely false. They've been purposely put to sleep and purposely misguided. And again, you know, I love to blame the United States, but they're not the only place where this is done. It's everywhere, right?
Oh, I know. I've been all over the world giving lectures on this subject. And everywhere I go, I see the same problems. People really believe whatever it is that their culture believes in, and whatever that culture has adopted as their national religion, etc. Everybody is staunchly connected to that, and they believe it's the absolute truth. And yet you get on the plane and go to another country nearby, and they've got a whole different view on everything. And they are fighting for it, boy. They'll fight you to protect their understanding of their culture and the way they see things. But, you know, where does this stuff end? Because obviously nobody has got the truth. I mean, I came across that many years ago. So many people are looking for truth. Yeah, that's fine. But if you think you have found the ultimate knowledge on the world and the ultimate knowledge of the universe, scientists will dare to tell you that what we believe scientifically could be proved 15 years ago is nothing but the misunderstanding today. We now understand we didn't know this, we didn't know that, we didn't understand this. So what we believed 15, 20 years ago is totally wrong. Well, that's in science, and now those are people who study their subject, and they were wrong. Then what about religion? Thousands of years ago, people have no idea in the world where religions have come from, why we say certain things we do. It's just an extraordinary situation that the human family finds itself in. And the use of words, and I've been talking about this for years. The use of words, you need to look at the words you use and understand where they came from. And, I mean, I could talk for hours just on the use of words. You know, a classic example is the word Semitic. This is one of the real bothersome subjects to me, is when I hear people using the word Semitic. And if you say anything about the Middle East or the Jewish religion, then you are anti-Semitic. First of all, there's a world of difference between the sun and the moon, between north and south, between wet and dry. So there's a world of difference between anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish. Two different words. Anti-Jewish means that you are against Jews, period. But anti-Semitic, if you look it up in a dictionary, which most people don't, but if you look it up in a dictionary, anti-Semitic, the word Semitic is applied to about 13 different races of people on the earth. 13 different countries and ancient cultures of the world are we recall as Semitic cultures. And so if you're anti-Semitic, that means you are anti-13 different countries and races and cultures of the world that you didn't even know were Semitic. So I'm just saying go back and look at the words you use, because when you say anti-Semitic, no, you should say anti-Jewish. Now that nails it down to one group. Semitic opens you up to 13 different races of peoples in the world. So that alone is just an example. I've even got a bigger example we can talk about in the next hour about the word Semitic, because it's actually a non-existing term. It's an illegitimate term to use the word Semitic. So when you hear professors and teachers and religious leaders and whoever else in colleges and universities use the word Semitic, just know that they don't know, or if they do, they're just liars. They don't know that it is an illegitimate term. There is, in point of fact, nothing to the word Semitic, which is actually in the world we live in. Semitic is a word that only an ignorant person would use. There is no such a thing as anything Semitic. Why? Because where does that word come from? Where do you get the word Semitic? And then when you find out you get the word Semitic from something that did not exist at all, something which was non-existent, it was just a dreamt up idea, like so many other ideas expressed in religion were just dreamt up by somebody that has no basis in fact whatsoever. So there is nothing to the word Semitic. Don't even use it. It's a word that has no basis about anything. There is no such a thing as Semitic. I'll explain it on, I know we're going to the hour break, but I'll explain that very quickly on the other side if you wish.
No,
why
absolutely.
Semitic is irrelevant.
Absolutely, I want to hear about that, because quite honestly, I am one of those people who did look it up. And what I saw was that there were a lot of people that count as Semitic that are not Jewish, according to the term. And really the most striking and interesting part of it is that I happened to, the reason why I looked it up is because I made friends, you see, with somebody who was a Palestinian, okay, but he was a Christian Palestinian, mm-hmm. You see, and this opened up my eyes to something that was outside of the normal narrative. This is years ago, but this opened my eyes up to something that was outside of the narrative. See, Palestinians are supposed to be what? Muslims, terrorists, they're against, blah, blah, blah. You know, the state of Israel, we're supposed to protect them. All that kind of stuff in the mainstream sense, right?
Yeah.
And even today from the pulpits in the churches, they tell you that you can't possibly be a Christian unless you're willing to defend Israel. And Israel in and of itself, to not defend Israel is to be taking a position against God himself. They'll tell you that in a Christian church today, Jordan. And
I know.
It's amazing to me. But anyway, I wanted to look at this term Semitic and anti-Semitic. And right. How is it that I could even be friends with a Palestinian? This is why I looked it up. That made me anti-Semitic. And I said, well, gee, I don't actually hate Jews, and I thought that's what that term meant. And they said, no, it's not hatred of Jews. You're anti-Semitic. I said, okay, well, let's look up what that word means, since I'm being called something, and I don't know what it is. Or maybe I don't know what it is. So I go to look it up, and I realize that my Christian friend would also count as Semitic.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
So I explain this and I say I'm not against him. I'm not against all these other people that seem to fall under this Semitic label. But you're about to tell us in the next hour something a little different about the term Semitic, and I really want to hear it. So I suggest you guys stick around. Jordan Maxwell's with me. We're certainly talking about religion, and that whole thing comes back up again when you start to talk about Zionism. Mm-hmm. Or anti-Zionist beliefs or views, which is another trouble spot for me on occasion, because some people say I'm not against Zionism enough. Some people, when I bring it up, I am anti-Semitic, etc. And it's always interesting to watch the terminology that's thrown around out of ignorance. But
that's what I'm saying.
But that's not what we're doing tonight with Jordan Maxwell. Let's see. You guys should be able to hear the cue. I don't know if we're hearing the outro music, but you should be able to hear it here at Ocelli.com. Jordan Maxwell will be right back. Begins now here at Ocelli.com. A little bit late beginning of the hour, but we went just a little bit long in the first hour. Doesn't matter. It's a good, solid 2 hours here tonight on a Monday with Jordan Maxwell. And we are certainly discussing religion. This is another in a continuing series with Jordan, and I advise that you check out all of them. I'm placing them on YouTube on the fast track to make sure that they're out there for everybody to get a hold of right away. But they're also put out, via podcast through the usual mechanisms and all that, available in the Apple, iTunes store, Stitcher, shownotes.com, all those places that pick it up, including the Google podcast thing, which they just started, all of that. And, well, a bag of chips. I mean, everywhere I can put it, that's where this show is going, out there for free for everyone, because I think we all need to hear from Jordan Maxwell, whose immense body of work goes well beyond description. I mean, if I wanted to sit here and just list the things that he's done that you can access in one way or another over the years, I mean, I would waste the entire rest of this hour because I would have to list all of that for you. But I'll tell you what. You don't need to go through the list. All you need to do is go to jordanmaxwellshow.com. jordanmaxwellshow.com. And, hey, if you want to go deeper than what's there, because that is the only website, which is Jordan Maxwell's website, okay, if you go deeper there, then you go into the Research Society. It's a pretty easy button to find. And, yes, it is behind a paywall and all that, but it's actually not very expensive to get a lifetime subscription over there. Just want you guys to know that, and well worth it. There is a ton of knowledge there, more being added as time goes on, but there's already enough there. If you went there today for the first time, I guarantee you much more would be uploaded before you got through with really studying even half of what is behind that wall. Now, one of the subjects in there is about religion, but it also covers government, money, the law, various social issues over the years, the news, history. I mean, you name it, it's in there, and it's about the knowledge which is not necessarily all hidden, but some of it is. And it's definitely about the knowledge that is not being, spread for the most part in the most conventional ways where people pick up their knowledge at this point. So, nothing is typical there. It is all rare and all assembled by Jordan. Some of these things, including ebooks and videos and audios, I'm pretty sure it's the only place you're going to find this sort of a collection on the internet anywhere. In fact, I don't think you'll find it in a library either, at least not organized into a collection. You might be able to collect this over the course of many years, but it might take you 50 plus years like it took Jordan. Just saying. Anyway, Jordan, we when we went to break, we had started to talk about this concept of anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish, and anti-Jewish is certainly, or anti-Jewish or anti-Jew, I guess, would be more of an apt title for a lot of what I see, actually. There are people that are anti-Jew, anti-Jewish, for sure. But to be anti-Semitic is usually the term that they throw at you, and if you begin to discuss Zionism or you begin to discuss the truth about, I don't know, what might really be in the Talmud or the Kabbalah, or, you're all of a sudden being slapped with these labels of being anti-Semitic. And again, it is the ignorance of the wielder of said label that is most interesting here because, as we described earlier, that there might be more than one kind of person that could be described as Semitic in the first place, but you said something most intriguing that, quite honestly, I'm anxious to learn about, which is that Semitic in and of itself is a fictitious title. And I've never really actually heard that before. So by all means, could you explain that?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. Good that you asked, because I would like to. If you use the word Semitic at all, it implies that you are ignorant and ill-informed and unread, because intelligent people who have a very good education, a very good rounded education of the world they live in, would not use the word Semitic. It's a word you don't use in public unless you don't know. If you're ignorant and ill-informed, you use words, and people who are wise and intelligent will know, obviously, that you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I like that scripture. Basically, it says in the Bible to keep your mouth shut and let everyone think that you're a fool, instead of opening your mouth and proving it. So I think that you need to understand where words come from. The very word Semitic is, as I said, a word that should not be used at all because it has no lawful and legal and legitimate foundation for using that term. It comes from the word Shem. Actually, originally it's Shemitic. And then we take it and change it in our English today. We call it Semitic. No, it's Shemitic, S-H. And it comes from the story in the Bible of Noah and the ark. And Noah and the ark, we all have heard, Noah had his wife, and then he had 3 sons, and they had 3 wives. So there was Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their 3 wives. So now we're talking about 8 people. We know that if you take the letter 8 and lay it down on its side, it becomes a symbol for infinity. You can ask any Jewish rabbi, any rabbinical authority, what is the symbolism in Judaism for the number 8? Is it important? And then you will have to sit for an hour while the rabbi explains to you all of the mysticism in the Jewish religion based on the number 8. And the first thing he will tell you is that 8, when it's laid down on its side, becomes a symbol for infinity. Because 8 is the only number that you can write on a piece of paper with a pen or a pencil, and never never lift the pen from the paper. You can make the 8 backwards and forwards. You can make the 8 continual and never lift your pen or pencil off the paper. And so, as I said, you lay it down on its side and it becomes a symbol for infinity, forever. You can just sit there and draw an 8 forever. And so 8 has a symbolic meaning in the Jewish religion. So already it's very questionable about there were 8 people on the Ark of Noah. The second and most important point about the word Semitic is that one of Noah's sons, he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So therefore, we're supposed today to have 3 major lineages of humans on the earth: the Shemitic, which we call Semitic, and the Hamitic, Hamitic, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the Japhetic. Well, first of all, there was no Noah and the ark to start with. It's just a story. It was taken from a far more ancient story in the Middle East of, what was the name of that fable, where God tells the king that he's going to flood the earth and to build an ark. A lot of people know what I'm talking about. It slips my mind right now. It's called the Gilgamesh epic.
Yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and
That's
this is, the funny thing is that's the most recognizable one, but quite honestly, as you well know, there is more than one place where one can find the template long before the Old Testament or the...
Oh, absolutely. No doubts about it. I just was thinking about that particular one. It's so well known that it's called the Gilgamesh epic.
Right.
And the story goes back to the old ancient Sumerians, 1,000 years before Noah would have even been born. 1,000 years before Noah would have existed. And the story is that in the Gilgamesh epic, it's an ancient story about how God was going to flood the earth, And so he told the great king to gather his family and take all the animals and put them into an ark, and he's going to destroy the earth, etc., etc. Well, so today we have in the Old Testament the old Gilgamesh epic, but we call it the Ark of Noah, Noah's Ark. And so we now know that it was just a story based on an earlier story. And so if that's true, which it is, and it's provable, we know that's true, then that means there was no Noah and there was no ark. Well, if there was no Noah and no ark, then there was no Shem, Ham, or Japheth. And there was no 8 people who came off the ark. We know that is true. There was no such ark. And we know that the earth was never, under any circumstances, ever flooded with water. We know that. Logic alone would tell you. You don't even have to go to school to figure that one out. Logic would tell you that the earth itself was not overflowed with water. Yes, we do have oceans, but we do have large continents too. And they're not underwater. And so, and we also know scientifically and mathematically that you cannot surround the whole earth with water. There's not that much water there. Not that much water on the earth to submerge the whole world underwater. And if that were true, which it obviously isn't, but if it were, where did the water go? You know, where did it go? And so, well, then you break it all down and you finally see, no, the story of Noah and the ark and his 3 sons and all of that was a beautiful story, but it just goes back 1,000 years earlier to another time and another story from another culture. So and therefore Jordan, there was no...
About that, though, just really quickly, I'm wondering this, because the concept that there may have been a local occurrence to a particular area that became absolutely decimated by a tsunami, by a flood, whatever, that this could have actually occurred in some way at some point in history and then evolved into this story that became part of the Gilgamesh epic. Part of these things that we see being written down, where there could have been a natural disaster at one point in time. You can see evidence of that on the earth, right? So that,
Absolutely. You can see it in the mountains of the world. The mountains of the earth all have, you can see strata, cuts in the mountain sides and the hills where the strata was erupted. Yes, there was absolutely terrible destruction that did happen on the earth. And it did cause a horrible flood. Yes, and the flood is part of so many hundreds of cultures in the world, from Native Americans, Africans, Asians, people from Europe, Russia. There are all these ancient cultures and peoples. They talk about a massive flood. And I am of the opinion that's exactly what happened. There was a massive flood, but there wasn't no Noah and there was no ark, but there was a flood. And the flood, I am totally convinced after looking at the subject for 60 years, is what Plato was talking about when he talked about Atlantis. It says that Atlantis was destroyed. It was an enormous continent like or similar to Australia. It's not just a little island. No, it was a huge island. It was a continent. And it was in, from what Plato said, Solon, the Egyptian mystical teacher, told the ancient Greeks that there was a great and enormous continent in the Atlantic Ocean. It's not there today, but at one time there was a great continent in the Atlantic, and it was called Atlantis, from which we get the word Atlantic, from Atlas, or from Atlantis. And so the story goes from what Solon, the Egyptian teacher, told Plato and the other Greeks that this great continent the size and as large as Australia, and one day and one night went under the ocean. Well, we understand how that could be, because if you go back and read the scriptures in Genesis about the destruction of Atlantis, and that's what it's talking about in the Bible in Genesis. And it says, in one day and one night, the scripture says what's the word? It says the deep opened up. It not only rained for many, many days hard all over that area of the earth, was heavy, terrible rains and flooding, but it says, but the deep, the ground of the deep, talking about the floor of the ocean, it says the deep cracked open and the continent fell into the ocean. They fell through the cracks in the ocean that was holding the continent up. But the floor of the ocean, the Bible says, was cracked, and the whole entire continent dropped into the ocean, and the waters came over, and it's gone forever. Well, then, if that were to happen, you can imagine if Australia was to drop down many, many, many miles in 1 hour, drop down into the ocean, because the ocean plates opened up and the whole continent went under. You can imagine that it's going to cause one hell of a reaction all over the earth. And people for thousands of years will remember and tell their children about the great event of a great continent being destroyed in just an hour or two, a few hours, and it was gone forever. Well, that's the story of Atlantis, that the waters of the deep broke open, and the world fell into it, and it was a great flood. Well, I understand that. That makes sense. And so I believe Atlantis actually existed, and I think that's probably where Adam and Eve were created. I think that's probably a lot of interesting things that we read in the Bible actually was talking about something that happened in Atlantis, because the Atlantis story does say what the Bible says. It was destroyed overnight. It was a great flood, and the continent and the whole world of that time dropped into the ocean.
Well, right, and the interesting thing here is that, for somebody who says, well, this still sounds like a flight of fantasy, here's what it is. The story in and of itself does not have to be accurate. It represents something that might have actually occurred, and I believe it did, and I think it was something more akin to what we saw when, the Fukushima disaster happened, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have a great earthquake which occurred under the, under the water. Okay. And then because of the cracking and the twisting of the earth, a huge tsunami was created. And if you imagine this on a larger scale, and say Japan disappeared in 2011 as opposed to just what happened, which was a horrendous natural disaster. But if you imagine that Japan disappeared, you think there wouldn't be stories about that for the next couple thousand, if not forever?
Got that right. That's exactly right. If Japan had gone under because of the plates holding up the Pacific Ocean were to really crack, and Japan as a nation just sunk under, within 24 hours, it was gone forever. And millions of people died instantly, and it's gone forever. You can bet that story will chase the world for thousands of years to come. They will be talking about the great tsunami and the great earthquake in which millions of people died instantly. Yeah, well, that's what the Bible talks about, how the whole world was consumed by water and people died. And that goes back to the Gilgamesh epic. So the bottom line is, there's the stories out there, but you need to go back and look at where the stories came from. And if there was no, like I said, if there was no Noah and the ark and his wife and 3 sons, then there was no Shem. And if there was no Shem, then there was no Shemitic people. If there's no Shemitic people, there was no Semitic people. It's just a word we use. And so that's why I'm saying there was no need to use the word Semitic because it's based on Shemitic, and that was one of the sons of Noah who didn't exist. So that's the name of that too. When you get back to Christ, we talk about the anti-Semitic. Well, anti-Christ is another term that's being used that people have no idea what it means.
Well, and this is a bizarre thing because, and I told you this during the break, but hey, let's do it in public. The fact is that people talk about the Antichrist all the time. The Antichrist, don't forget. It's not just a Antichrist, although in some cases we have groups of Antichrists. Like when people try to study, Nostradamus and his writings, they say that he describes 3 Antichrists. Everything comes in threes. Take note of that all the time, by the way. But it's interesting that they say that, Nostradamus represented 3 Antichrists. The first one was Napoleon, the second one was Hitler, and the third one, he's going to come from the Middle East, right? At one point, when we were allegedly having problems with Saddam Hussein over in the Middle East, maybe he's the Antichrist that Nostradamus spoke of. So on and so forth. Or maybe Osama bin Laden is the Antichrist, the guy with a turban who's going to come out of the Middle East, and all this madness, and it really just gets to this interesting theme. Who is the Antichrist? Today, it's still popular for people out there to talk about Barack Obama was the Antichrist. He is the Antichrist. Some people talk about the Pope is the Antichrist. The Antichrist. The Antichrist seems to be everywhere you want to find him. I don't mean to make a joke, Jordan, but I mean, it's starting to feel like one. Because these people that so vehemently talk about the Antichrist, they're really just hooked into this cycle of fear and foreboding and really anxiously awaiting the world to end based on their reading of a prophecy or alleged reading of an alleged prophecy. So, yeah, I'd like to hear about the Antichrist. I mean, we talked anti-Semitic. Well, we've destroyed the reason for the use of the word Semitic in really short form. What about this idea of the Antichrist?
Well, first of all, you have to understand it's 2 words. One's anti and one's Christ. Most people using the term Antichrist have no comprehension at all what the word Christ means and where did it come from. And so people say, well, Christ was the Messiah. No, actually, the word Christ simply means oil. This is why we have something like Crisco. Crisco, the company Crisco, makes a Crisco oil. It's a cooking oil, but it's called Cristo. Actually, that's not correct. Cristo, it actually in Greek is Christo. Christo becomes Crisco. Well, Cristo is an oil in Greek, and so therefore, Crisco, well, it is a cooking oil. But it's based on Christo, which is a Greek word, but in the Latin it becomes Crisco. And so therefore today we have a cooking oil called Crisco, which is Christ in Greek. So Christ means oil. And I'll get back to that in just a minute about the oil. That's a whole different subject. But to have an anti-Christ, we think of anti meaning against Christ. Something which, in our language today, we say somebody's anti. That means he's against something. But that's not what the word in Greek means. Ask anybody who understands the Greek language, they'll tell you the word anti does not mean to be against anything. So when you say something or somebody was anti-Christ, well, he's against Christ. No. Anti in Greek means to actually be the Christ. They are not saying they're against somebody being Christ. They want to be Christ. So it's actually they want to be in the place of someone else. So if you're saying you're Christ, it means you're not against Christ. You want to be Christ. So it's not against, but you want to be the Christ yourself. And so I can understand why I don't have any problem with using the term Napoleon was an antichrist or Hitler was an antichrist. If you understand it correctly, what the word Christ means, it means a Messiah or one who is anointed for power, and that Hitler wanted to be anointed for power himself. He don't want to give it to Christ. He wants it. So, okay, well then it doesn't mean Hitler's against Jesus. It means he wants to be Jesus. He wants to be the Christ. So in that way, I understand, okay, that word makes sense. That Hitler would be an antichrist, not the. Because today, all over the world, all men seem to want to be an anti in the original Greek use of the word, not Latin. Everybody seems to want to be what somebody else is. You know, everybody wants to be a Steven Spielberg. Well, there's only one of him, so you're not going to be him. Well, we want to be like Muhammad Ali. Well, yeah, but the whole human race wants to be like somebody else. And so, well, that's anti in the original ancient Greek. Doesn't mean you're against Muhammad Ali. It means you want to be like him. So that's what the word antichrist simply means. Somebody who wants to be like Christ. He wants to be the Christ. And so that, it doesn't mean you're against anything. It just means you want to be instead of the one that is, you want to be.
Well, in that way, if someone were to actually be the Antichrist, they would be someone who wants to be most powerful above all, anointed for power above everyone else in place of all powers. Because the would, indicates a singularity, right? And indicates this godlike position. So someone who actually seeks to be or is the Antichrist would literally be someone who wants to be God, I guess.
That's exactly right. Somebody who wants to be the ultimate power in the universe and sees himself as the ultimate power in all the universe, and therefore we could say he was an antichrist in the ancient Greek setting, not in the Latin, because anti today just simply means to be against. No, this mentally deranged moron who thinks that he is God, he's not against God, he's saying he is God. And he wants to be the gods. Well, then he is an anti-God. He's an antichrist. He wants to be Christ. So, when you're using the word antichrist, just understand what it means. That's all. Do your homework and see what the word actually implies. So,
no, I find that incredible because, again, this is not the way people use the term. Now, it's interesting that you say, it's not in the Latin sense, but it is in the Greek sense. The Greek language preceded Latin, to the best of my knowledge. But it's interesting because when you see the transference from the Greeks sort of controlling the known world over to the Romans used Latin. And is this where the mistranslations begin? Is this where the misunderstandings and misuses of words begin? Or did it come in later somehow?
Well, I think that was a good start. That was a very good start for the misunderstanding because Rome took so much of the religion and so much of the accoutrements of power and governmental superstructure and philosophies and ideas and old belief systems and interwove them into the Roman pantheon of gods and the Roman government, into the Roman way of philosophy and law, etc. And so it inherited a lot from the ancient Greeks and the Grecian Empire. And so much of Rome was probably actually inhabited by the old Greeks. And when their empire started collapsing, they moved forward. They moved elsewhere and ended up in what we call today Europe. They ended up in Europe trying to get away from the fall of the Grecian Empire. And today we see so many Italians who are actually of Greek ancestry. So Rome took a lot from the ancient Greeks. You can bet on that. But again, you just have to understand that the world of mankind did not appear out of nowhere. Everything has had to come from something else. So when you see a religion like the Roman universal religion, the religion that Rome promoted around its whole empire, the entire empire of the Roman Empire, was the religion of Caesar was being promoted throughout the whole of the empire, all through the Mediterranean, down into Egypt, etc. The world of that time, and that was massive, the world of that time under the Roman Empire. And so there was a religion being promoted under the authorship of Rome. And so it was called the Roman Universal Religion. The universe, as much as humans knew about then, back in the Roman Empire, it was the whole universe to them. No, we look at it as, no, it's not the whole universe, but it was a very great empire at one time, and Caesar's religion was being promoted over the whole of the empire. So we had something, I guess you would call it, a Roman universal religion. Well, universal in Latin is the word Catholic. So we say today that it was a Roman Catholic religion. Catholic simply means universal. So therefore air is Catholic because it's everywhere. Water is Catholic. Why? Because it's everywhere. It's universal. Stupidity is Catholic. Why? Because it's everywhere. Stars are Catholic. Why? Because they're everywhere. Go out at night and everywhere you look is a star. So anything which is everywhere, all over, is Catholic. That's a word that is used as not the name of a church. It's a word in Latin which means universal. It's big. It's all over the world. And so people, the human race, is Catholic. Period. Why? Because there's people everywhere. Doesn't mean they belong to a particular church. No, the word in Latin simply means people are everywhere. Anything that's everywhere is all over, is referred to as Catholic. So, today we have the Roman Catholic religion, which is the religion of the ancient Roman Empire, based on the ancient Grecian Empire, which had based itself on the great empires of the Middle East, and India, and Asia Minor, it's an extraordinary story of the evolution of mankind as it begins to grow and mature and begins to reach out into the rest of the world and take its religions, its customs, it's all of its natural abilities, and they move out into the world. And today we have a world filled with people from all over the earth. But this is what happened thousands of years ago, and these people all had their different religions, different belief systems, and their words all basically, were in their customs, so people understood what it was saying. But today we use the words, and we don't even begin to realize what these words actually mean. And if we did, we wouldn't use them. The very word Hebrew is a derogatory term. It's like using the N word for the blacks. It's a derogatory term. It's not very nice to call somebody a Hebrew. It's, at one time those were fighting words a long time ago. So if you want to call somebody a Hebrew today, thank God they don't know what it means. Because those are fighting words. So, but how many people know that? Well, I know that because I just read. Read what it means. So, where did the word Jew come from? We spell it J-E-W. That's not how the King's English spelled it. Go back to the old Oxford Dictionary of the English language, which takes you back to the very, very beginnings of what we call the Anglo-Saxon, British, English, Germanic peoples and their words, and look at what the word meant. When you use the word, when you use different words today in English, what did they actually mean? So, it's just a wonderful story of how deep the world really is and how much we don't know about it. It's extraordinary. And
I find it interesting that look, I did not study the Greek history as much as I did the Roman history. Partially because, I wanted to know about my own alleged culture. So I spent a bit of time studying, the Irish people. I spent a little bit of time studying the Italian people, so on and so forth. Although, up until the beginning of the 20th century, there wasn't a legitimate Italy as a singular nation. But
that's right.
It's fascinating that there is this unified culture that comes together at one point. It's not universal. What it really is a collection of bits and pieces of various other cultures from around the world, and they all wind up congregating seemingly magnetically to this one area in Europe, which happened to be Italy, what we call Italy today. Now, what's fascinating about that is when I start to take a look at other empires which were built. Historically, I sort of see a recurring pattern here where, and I believe today that we live in the age of the American empire because, look, we've got military outposts all over the planet.
Exactly.
We have military supremacy. Seems as though, influence, whether for better or worse, is felt everywhere from this place we call America. So I am satisfied to call this the American empire. I've got to say that anything that I recognize as an empire in reality is something that seems to consume and appropriate the cultures. And I mean, and this is not just it's not just white people problems, by the way. I take a look at how the Chinese empire functioned. Okay,
that's
and
exactly
they did
right.
the same thing. They consumed the other cultures. They sort of magnetically drew in these other aspects of other peoples into themselves and became this new thing, which was affected by, to some degree, but also wiping out the individual cultures as it went. And this happened, with the Romans. You can see it everywhere. The way that they handled Germany, the way they handled, what we call the United Kingdom, Britain today. The fact
French,
that,
the French Empire, and it's all over the world too. Yeah, and as I've said, the Vatican was founded back in the year 325 A.D., back in the 4th century, and the Roman Empire has, I said this a couple of weeks ago, the Roman Empire has actually dominated the world and dominated Europe especially. For over 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire, dominated Europe. Well, over 2,000 years ago, Europe has dominated the world. So all roads lead to Rome. Rome has been dominating Europe and the Middle East for about 2,500 years. And so, and it's been dominating Europe for 2,500 years. Well, yeah, but Europe has dominated the earth for 2,500 years. And so the bottom line is that Europe is now pretty much dominated the globe. All the major European countries of Europe all have their subsidiary operations all over the earth. The French are in Africa, they're in Asia, the British are in Asia, Africa, and in Egypt. The Germans, my God, they're everywhere. The Americans. So these ancient cultures all go back to Rome, to the Roman Empire. And when we get back into religion, we find that I was going to talk about, and I'll give you a few things to look at until our next show. Give you a few things to look at concerning Moses that I don't think I've brought up in the past. We did talk about Moses, with his magic wand, but go on the web. It's very easy and quick to get pictures there. Go on the web to image and click on the word image first, and that will take you to only pictures. Then type in Jesus, Moses, with wands, W-A-N-D-S, magic wands. And you will see that all over Europe and the world, paintings and cathedrals and sculpturings all over the world of Jesus and Moses and all of the biblical names that you're familiar with. They all did what they did with magic wands. Go back and look at it on the web. Magic wands. Jesus, Moses, and magic wands. Another thing I was going to tell you about, and I think we may have mentioned it just in passing, why it is in the Western world today. If you go to a synagogue, it's spelled S-Y-N, synagogue. But in Israel, it's spelled S-I-N, not S-Y-N. Why is it spelled in Israel S-I-N, synagogue? Mm. Because the worship in a synagogue in Israel is the worship of the god Sin. Synagogue is a house of worship for the god Sin, S-I-N.
Right. Now, believe it or not, we went through this pretty extensively about how it's about at nighttime. We talked about Mount Sinai. We talked about a lot of that. Now, Jesus and Moses with the magic wand, though, that is something that we've only actually gone over in passing. And some people would say that's a crazy notion. Some of these very intense Christian people that call themselves, very fundamental Christians or whatever that are on the internet and teach about these things tell you that whenever you see a magic wand in television shows or whatever, that it's absolutely evil. Stay away from it. It is against Christianity. It would be remarkable for them to turn around and put into their image searches and go and find these depictions of Jesus and Moses both with magic wands, because it might make their heads explode. Some of these people. Yeah,
well,
I'm sorry.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make your head explode with knowledge and wisdom and understanding.
That's right.
Education. Yeah, go back and check out magic wands in the Bible, and you will see Moses did all of his magical miracles with the magic wands. Moses in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol today is carrying a large magic wand. Jesus is pictured all over Europe and around the world in Christian churches, waking people from the dead, healing the sick and the poor with a magic wand. That's all history. Go back and look at it. Just go there and see it. And then, talking about Moses again, why is it, and go on the web and go to image and type in Moses with horns. And you will find that Moses is always pictured in any representation of carvings, statues, stained glass, pictures and books. No matter where you see a picture of Moses, he always has horns on his head. Like the devil, he has horns. So go back and look at the pictures with Moses with horns and on the web, and see how many hundreds and hundreds of pictures around the world showing Moses with horns like the devil. Why is Moses pictured around the world with horns? I'm just giving you some ideas to go look at, do some research, and we can talk about it if you want to later.
Oh, absolutely. The next time we get together, I'd love to go over just these two subjects, and I think it would probably take up the entire time.
I think so.
I would throw one thing into that equation, though, and it's a question. Because, there are various, let's call them gods, deities, representations of other creatures that have horns outside of the devil. This idea of the devil himself having horns, I almost, it occurs to me that this is a misappropriation of a pre-existing deity that has been brought into that equation as well. This idea that the adversary himself, horns? Why does he have horns exactly? Because scripturally, there's a lot of things with horns. There's many beasts with horns that are talked about. But, and I have read the King James Version of the Bible as well as another version of it from cover to cover. I don't recall a good explanation as to this fallen angel suddenly having horns and why he's depicted the way he is and all of that. So I think that would be another thing to add to this idea, like, so that we could explain about the horns and where they really come from and all that next time. Yeah.
The horns on the devil comes directly from an ancient Greek god named Bacchus Dionysus.
Yes.
Bacchus Dionysus had horns, and if you go and look up the word Bacchus Dionysus, you will see this ancient Greek god is exactly what we today in the modern day world picture in our minds the devil. He's this long face, long big horns, evil, look at his eye, evil, carrying a pitchfork, and he looks demonic, and he looks frightening, this god Bacchus Dionysus. And he has grapes all around him. He's the grape, he's the wine, the god who drinks he drinks the wine of the grapes. And he's called Bacchus Dionysus, or just Bacchus. And it's simply the picture of the devil. And so that's where we get this picture of the devil in our minds, not from Satan, but from Bacchus Dionysus, who we have been presented by the churches. He is a classic example, what the churches would like you to understand the devil to be, this scary looking demonic creature with horns and these eyes, which are demonic eyes. He's got a pitchfork and he's evil. But that's a Greek god named Dionysus, Bacchus Dionysus. And so that's where we get that from.
Yeah,
but
even though he's the god of wine, and all that, it's kind of interesting because I don't view the reading that, at least the readings I've done of the stories of the Greek gods, I don't read, and some people might pronounce it Dionysus as opposed to Dionysus, but I don't read that as an evil god per se, or an evil entity, or the evil entity on the planet. I mean, really, it's just, it's about wine, and it's about, there's more to it, but wine and spirits, the fact that it's actually called a spirit comes from the belief system that goes around that god, who was praised by Greek soldiers and all that kind of stuff before they went into battle, and afterwards they would celebrate with praising Dionysus for their victory, their survival, etc. I'm not saying that it's a good guy god in the pantheon of many gods. I'm saying that it's certainly not the giant adversary devil thing on the planet. And it's really weird that was sort of adopted into the imagery of what we call Christianity. But we're almost at the end of our time, and I certainly want to get into an extensive discussion about Moses with the horns, and also Moses and Jesus both with magic wands, because, according to the official story, Moses has a staff. I don't recall anybody really talking about Jesus with a magic wand, but hey, we're going to do that next time. In the meantime, I advise all you guys to go over to jordanmaxwellshow.com, which is the only website that is actually Jordan Maxwell's, and join the Research Society. There's an easy-to-find button right there. As bad as my eyesight is, telling you, I can find it no problem. There's an easy to follow directions there, and you can join the Research Society at jordanmaxwellshow.com. The button is on the site there, and get even deeper into not only this subject, but many, many others. Jordan, with the last couple of minutes, because I don't want to open up another topic or something, we'll save it for next time around, and we've already got a game planned. Sounds like Jesus and Moses with magic wands, and why does Moses have horns, works perfectly for another 2 hours, but or more. But I think we can get it down to 2 hours if I keep my mouth shut and help you out that way.
That's all right.
Go ahead. If there's anything you'd like to add before we're done.
Yeah, we're told that Moses, led the people of Israel, led the children of Israel. I mean, Israel has children. They were called the children of Israel. We don't have children. We have kids. Those are goats, baby goats. So The children of Israel were Israeli offspring, and they referred to in the Bible as children. So they were the children of Israel. But today you don't have children. Today you have kids, which are baby goats. I don't know what that's telling you. But the mere fact that Moses was leading the Israelites in this endless search for a place to live in the wilderness, and so the people became very hungry and started belly aching about the fact that they used to eat so well in Egypt, and now they're not eating at all. And so Moses asked God to feed the people so they won't die, and feed the people and keep their mouth shut and keep them happy. Please feed them. So God gave the people of Israel, the children of Israel, manna from heaven. Well, that's another subject. What was the manna from heaven that God was feeding the people, and Moses was leading the people each morning to go out and pick up off the ground something called the manna from heaven? That's another story that we need to get into when you find out what manna actually meant, and the whole story about how God fed the ancient Israelite people with the manna from heaven. There's so many other stories that we can investigate, but just keep in mind that religion is far, far different than you think it is, and nothing you've read in the Bible, nothing you've ever heard in your life about your religion. There is no particular one religion. All the religions of the world have come from somewhere. And everybody thinks they have the truth. And in point of fact, there virtually is no truth. You need to go back because, like Steve Allen, my dear friend Steve Allen used to say, there are two kinds of facts. The kind you look up and the kind you make up. And that's what the world's religions and governments and all of our human societies are made up facts. No truth in any of it, period.
Interesting side note about Steve Allen. A lot of people, if you look at some of the clips that are available, and people that are, younger than you and younger than me, Jordan, to be honest with you, might not recall the whole of the personality of Steve Allen. They might be aware that he was a stand-up comedian. They might be aware that he was a television show host. But here's something that not a lot of people do know, and that is that he was actually well studied on a great many subjects and was extremely intellectual. Not in the conventional sense all the time, although he did have a great deal of knowledge. I don't know what degree he ever held, but from many accounts from people that I've known who personally interacted with him, they would tell me that they were always surprised by the level of knowledge that, this entertainer had. And really interesting guy. I one of those people in history, if you could name 5 people in history you'd like to spend time with.
What was it? Meeting of the Minds?
Mm-hmm.
The television show Meeting of the Minds that Steve Allen conducted.
Right.
He was the first man on NBC, the very first person in the history of television in America that came up with the idea of something called the Tonight Show. And it was a late night entertainment show where he would have guests on and joke and laugh and play music. And he was the host of the first Tonight Show. And Johnny Carson, no. All the different Tonight Show hosts, nobody seems to ever give him credit that he was the man that came up with the idea for NBC Tonight Show. And everybody, all the older folks, all the old people know. They remember Steve Allen as the host of the Tonight Show. And he was a great musician and a comedian and incredible knowledge. But he's written like some 40 books on all kinds of subjects. He was an incredible mind, a brilliant man. And a good friend of mine.
Eclectic is what I understand. And that's the thing, the Steve Allen Show, if you go and look up the Steve Allen Show, you'll find out that was absolutely the predecessor to what Johnny Carson made an entire career out of, what Jay Leno continued to do, and all that, and what still exists today, actually, as a thing. Not saying it's anywhere near the depth or interesting, what shall we call it, textures that it existed at during, television's golden age. But Steve Allen, an interesting character. I just wanted to make that little note on the way out the door. Of course, I've had the pleasure of having the interesting character of Jordan Maxwell with me tonight, who is also a good guy and really smart and really somebody who has studied so much and has gathered so much knowledge. Again, I advise you, go over to JordanMaxwellShow.com. Join the Research Society. The button is nice and big. It's easy to see over there. It doesn't cost a lot to get a lifetime membership, and it is worth it.